Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Is my sound okay? You can hear me? From George, yeah? Welcome to everyone on Zoom. Hope you're doing well. We're doing well. So I could dip into these questions again. It's actually very helpful to have questions. You emphasize trusting and taking refuge in awareness, which is unchanging. Why does anicca not apply here, since Buddha implied that all things are impermanent? That's actually a very important question. Sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe dhamma anatta. Teaching doesn't say sabbe dhamma anicca. Why is that? Why is that? Why doesn't it say sabbe dhamma anicca? Well, I always go back to as you know, quite often, almost every retreat, I talk about the story of the Buddha's renunciation, because for me, that's the logical point. That's the logical situation that I used to understand why he teaches the way he teaches. So you have the story of Prince Siddhartha, and he's successful, very successful human being. He feels some mode of discontent. He's not satisfied with life, not because he has any real kind of problems. It's just some kind of deep dissatisfaction haunts his mind. And then we have the kind of mythical story of the Buddha going out to the village with his charioteer, and he sees an old man, a sick person, and a corpse. And each time he sees that, he sees an old person. And obviously this is a kind of mythical representation of a mind which is pondering life, but he sees the old person. He's never seen an old person. He says to Channa, so what's that? What was that? It's an old person. We all go that way. Huh? Really? Now, I can't believe that anyone living in India had never seen an old person, logically, but you could see how youth can be that way. Youth can kind of not really notice old age, even though it's all around, and not really think, well, I'm going there someday myself. So you look at it that way. And then the same with a very, very, did I just say old person or sick person? I can't remember. Anyway, there was another one. Let's Galileo. So let's say, what did I say? I said old. Okay, he sees a sick person. It's going to be a long night. And the depiction in the text is like really old, really like withered body and very, very old. And China, what's that? It's an old person. We all get old. So sick person, old person, whatever way I put it. And then he sees a corpse. And that's a shocker. I don't know, Thailand is probably, I know in monasteries we, Nanachat, we actually have cremations of bodies. People have died, but in the West, not so much, of course. So he sees the old person, and that's a real shocker. What's that? That's an old person. That's a dead person. We all die. So this is kind of an existential crisis for him. Really, is that all there is? Is it just old age, sickness, and death? And then, and these, of course, we call the Devadutas, the heavenly messengers. And then he sees a sadhu. And this is really the crux of that story for me. he sees a sadhu, and he asks, Jana, who's that? Oh, that's a sadhu. And the sadhu is seeking the deathless, yamata Dhamma. And to me, that's very crucial in the way I understand, first of all, the Buddha's renunciation and his aspiration. His aspiration is for the deathless. I guess Thailand, you have that word to some extent, but it's a very foreign word. You don't use it. I mean, it's a strange word, deathless, right? In European culture, we have no idea like that. There's no such concept. So it's very, very foreign. But an Indian philosophy and an Indian religious development, it's a common name. Not that the common folk really maybe understand it that much, but talking to one of our monks who is Indian background, Brahmin background, he says, yeah, that's a common part of Indian philosophy. So that then is the trigger, because now the Buddha is the Siddhartha is in kind of existential despair. Is this all it's about? No, there is the deathless. And there's a sadhu who is seeking the deathless. Oh, okay. And so the Buddha makes a determination to realize the deathless for the sake of all sentient beings. So to me, that's a very critical part of what he does then, and then why he teaches the way he teaches. So, and I just follow the logic of that. So then he does his various practices and he realizes enlightenment. And then how does he couch that? He couches it in various ways, but the way that refers to this question is he says there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed, the deathless, nibbana, peace, the end of suffering. And those words are terribly difficult. Uncreated. You cannot imagine the uncreated because any thought you have is created. Unborn, unoriginated, deathless. It's very, very difficult language. And so that then, if there were not the unborn, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the deathless, there would be no release from that which is born and dies. There would be no liberation if there wasn't that. And that speaks to this idea that the Buddha taught that all things are impermanent. So sabbe sankhara means that all conditioned things are impermanent. And sankhara means something which is like, let's say, these light fixtures are sankharas, they're constructs. And they depend on electricity and the bulb working. And they in turn create light. So the light is dependent on the bulb. And so the light is a sankhara. And then my seeing, being able to see the clock and know what time it is a sankhara. And then etc., etc. So sankharas are things which are both conditioned by factors, and they themselves also condition other factors. And so that's the idea of something that's constructed. And when you look at that, well, anything like that which is dependently originated, which is interchanged, cannot be permanent, right? It cannot be the deathless because it's dependent. It depends on other things. So then the logic goes, so how would you discover that? How would you discover the uncreated or the unoriginated? Well, if you always paid attention to the created and the formed, and in other words, sankharas, you'd be looking in the wrong place. Can't be a sankhara. So if you're looking for the unconditioned in a condition, you're looking in the wrong place. If you're looking for the deathless and that which begins and ends, you're looking in the wrong place. So where's the wrong place? Emotions are the wrong place. If your attention is always on emotions, That can't be it. If you want good emotions, sure, you go to the psychologist and say, please help me. I'd like better emotions. And that's okay. And we have good emotional teachings in Buddhism. But so Nibbana cannot be an emotion, because emotions come and go. It cannot be a sight. Sights are dependent, so it cannot be a sight. It cannot be a sound. It cannot be a smell or a taste or a bodily formation. It cannot be a relationship. It cannot be a society. It cannot be a Tesla. Or, you know, whatever you want. It cannot be a thing. So all things, in this sense, all compounded things, are impermanent. But to say that the Buddha said that everything is impermanent, wouldn't know, because then there would be no liberation. So if you follow the logic of that, then if you're interested in liberation from suffering, you begin to see that if I'm just paying attention to things which change, I'll never be free, because my attention is not available. I am attending to the wrong thing. Now I have to pay attention to the world. I have to pay attention to things that change, because that's just the way of being human, obviously. So we're not negating that, but there's something else we could do. And that's to begin to extricate ourselves from this compulsion to always be looking at things or doing things. And so you have the issue of tanha. Now, if you look at tanha and how it's defined, tanha is always about conditions. Being more happy, being less pain. It's always about conditioned phenomena. So tanha is the energy that pulls us into birth and death, into sankharas, into conditions. And the abandonment of tanha, desirelessness, is the non-engagement with sankharas. You're not engaging them with it anymore. For instance, you feel sad. For some reason, you feel sad. That's a sankhara. It comes because of conditions. It hangs about for a while, and then it ceases. So if your attention knows the sankhara of sadness feels this way. It began because of causes, it stayed for a while, and then it ceased, and you remain aloof from sadness. You know sadness is sadness. Then you begin to incline to the unconditioned, because you're not attaching to the conditioned. Huh? You see that? But that's hard to do, because sadness is not nice. I'd rather have happiness. So what do? Smoke some dope. Or whatever, right? Watch a movie, blame someone, do something, but witness sadness as sadness. But if I'm always then trying to replace one condition from another, my mind is always in sankhara, and I'm always in the conditioned realm. So then you start to have more interesting questions. Okay, if the Buddha says there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, the deathless, you start to look at your conscious experience in a much more interesting way, because you say, okay, what didn't begin and end? What wasn't born and didn't die? Because if it's unconditioned and not born, deathless, it has to be something right here and now. Because it can't be tomorrow, because tomorrow is about birth and death. Okay, so then you get the ideas of what akalika Dhamma means. Akalika Dhamma means not a matter of time. Not a matter of time. So here and now, pachatang, right? We have these words. So and logically, if you follow it logically, you say, yeah, okay. It has to be something about here and now. It can't be something about tomorrow over there. And that really begins to undercut your belief in craving. Craving is okay for things which, like, I know that, like if I'm making something, I want to make it well, yeah, that's the realm of craving. And that will take time. And I'll have to do it. It's a sankhara that needs to be created, and then it will be destroyed. That's the realm of craving. But the realm of Nibbana is not the realm of craving, because it's not the realm of time. So you begin to see, well, my efforts in meditation can't be about getting something. That logically does not work. And it can't be about getting rid of something. That logically doesn't work either. So you start to your inquiry then is, okay, what is it? What is it that doesn't change? And what's the conclusion? Well, to me, the most obvious conclusion, there is presence. It's undeniable. There is presence. Define it as you want, awareness or consciousness or Mickey Mouse. It doesn't really matter. It just is. And you cannot refute that. If I say to you, are you absent? What do you mean? I'm here, present. Huh? Well, now we don't look at presence because it just seems so, it's just so obvious. Yeah. So what we look at is objects. And why we look at objects because we want pleasure and we don't want displeasure. And so our attention is kidnapped, preoccupied with objective reality. So now the Buddha says, well, rather than say, point to the deathless, he says, well, okay, try this. Try to give up craving. And so he points to suffering. And the issue of suffering is very, very deep. It's not just about emotional suffering. It's the deep wrong identity and the wrong seeking in our lives for true peace and happiness. So each time we feel frustrated, I would say, or we feel a sense of lack, the suggestion is feel that rather than go to some other object to try to pacify it. So if you feel a sense of lack and you just witness it without hurting yourself, you still take care of yourself. You feel loneliness as loneliness. You feel annoyance as annoyance, whatever. You stay with that. Then you're starting to stay with that which is always there, which is presence or awareness, knowing, puru, all this different language we have, consciousness. And as you stay with that, you begin to sense the kind of silence which underlies everything. Because you're no longer going out into sense consciousness, and you begin to be interested in that. And that's why we say that awareness is the gateway to the deathless. It's an opening. So to say awareness is permanent is not quite right. To say it's impermanent, usually when we talk about it, we say it's an opening. And one of the ways to think about that, like a doorway, it's a good example. A doorway participates in the exterior and the interior. It's part of both. And maybe you could look at awareness that way, that it's part of the unconditioned, and yet it participates in the conditioned. It's hard to, these are hard imaginings to actually talk about them. But what else could it be, right? If you start just logically eliminating that which changes, you see, well, it cannot be the khandhas. So the khandhas are dukkha, not because they're bad. What did I have? Like a cappuccino is great. There's nothing. So it's not that kind of dukkha. It's just that it's the wrong place to look for nibbana. If you're looking for nibbana in a cappuccino, you're going to be disappointed, and so on and so forth. But it's not saying that cappuccinos don't taste great. Sometimes they do. So it's not like a negation of beauty or things like that. It's say, no, just look in the right place. So that's why we say sabbe sankhara dukkha, that all formations are dukkha. So we even say that like sense happiness is dukkha. Now that's weird, because dukkha sounds like it's unhappy, but it's not unhappy. It's just, that's the wrong place. So don't rely on sense happiness. When it comes, great, good for you, right? Enjoy. But when it changes, you say, well, yeah, that's supposed to change. So then you're no longer seeking happiness. Although you start to do things which make you happy. You live sila, you live dana, you calm the mind. So you create all the conditions for happiness, but that's not the goal. That's the method. Happiness is the method. That's weird. But not the happiness of sense distraction. It's the happiness of goodness. It's the happiness of dana. It's the happiness of non-desire. that we can all have. And that is a foundation for samadhi too. You know, when you live a good life and you're not hurting anyone, you don't have no remorse, you have a sense of joy in the heart. And that then helps with the whole idea of chasing things with tanha. So your mind gets more and more settled, and you keep asking that question. What is it that doesn't change? And so that's the kind of challenge I put to you. I say, listen to sound, feel the body. Listen to sound, feel the body. Notice the changing nature of sound. Notice the changing nature of body. And hopefully, and I say, okay, you went from 2 sense bases. Well, what did that? Does awareness change? Did awareness come and go? Huh? And it's a kind of inquiry which doesn't really require. It's not like a answer in a like a PhD exam on Buddhism. It's not that. It's not that. It's existential observation, your existence. So to this question, this is a common misunderstanding. It's all impermanent. All things, sabbe sankhara, sabbe dhamma anatta. What did the Buddha realize? What was it? And how do we realize that? And obviously, as a monk, I mean, that's my business. That's why I signed up and wear the outfit. You know, so I'm really interested in this. I'm really, really interested in this. But the whole teaching is, to me, logically very consistent to that original intention the Buddha has. So why do we teach paticca samuppada? Because paticca samuppada is showing us that anything which is in the realm of paticca samuppada is birth and death. That makes sense. Why do we teach the 5 khandhas as being anicca dukkha anatta? Because that's just showing us that the khandhas cannot be it. Why do we teach about tanha? Because tanha is the pursuit of experience, which is pleasure, and getting rid of displeasure. That can't be it. So logically, if you really kind of think through, first of all, why does the Buddha pick up this renunciation? Because he's depressed? No, he has a serious question about human existence. What does he do? He hears there's a sadhu, there is the deathless, there is the uncreated. I'm going to do that. I'm going to figure that out for all beings. And he does it. And then what does he teach? Well, his teaching must be in line with that kind of aspiration. So I find that really helpful to kind of logically know how my attention should play out. And that if I'm looking for something in the future in terms of my meditation, that can't be it. In terms of developing monasteries, sure, I look to the future. You know, I try to create a good environment where people can practice. Yeah, that's the realm of things. That's the realm of sankharas. So we have work in the realm of sankharas. But this is asankata. So sankata is compounded and conditioned, but it's asankata, not compounded, not conditioned. And what do you have? You know, think about it. What do you have? Well, you start to just can't be the body, can't be sight, can't be sound, can't be thought, can't be emotion, can't, no. And you're left with presence. And then so hence, trust and awareness. But you see how profound that is, right? It's not just trust and awareness so you don't trip over the wire. It's not just functional presence. It's kind of, it's you know, it's quite profound in that way. So thank you for the question. I've used those 4 divine messengers, we call them, to really get my mind in a kind of logical sense of why the teaching is the way it is. Then it all makes sense to me. It all kind of fits to that. Ooh, that one. So then, where was it? There's another one. Okay, every time I have to go up on stage to present work or public speaking, my body shakes heavily before. I know that very well. I just know that so well. I try to breathe deeply, yes, and it helps a bit. Once started talking, then it is okay. Yep, That's true. Should I be conscious, I think, of the shakiness feeling? Accept it to help? It is very noticeable. Yeah, that's called panic or fear. And fear is a powerful human emotion, right? Fear has a smell. Fear can make you go to the toilet, right? That's the deep kind of fear. Anxiety is a form of fear. Anxiety can be minimal, it can be huge, right? So understanding fear and knowing fear as an object is a big part of liberation, I think. So when you feel fear, in some sense, if it's not physically dangerous, so if the bear is going along the path at the monastery and I feel fear, then usually I don't embrace the bear. Oh, may you be well. I go back very slowly, very slowly. So that's biological fear, right? And that's just very natural. It's good to have it. But we have so much psychological fear, like being embarrassed or being self-conscious or like being afraid of giving a Dhamma talk. I think, why am I afraid? Everyone loves me. I'm not afraid now, but then it wasn't logical. It wasn't. That's it. Fear is not logical. You can't negotiate fear. It just is. So my sense of it was, if fear comes into consciousness, as long as it's not like a dangerous situation, it's a brilliant time to begin to observe it as a sankhara. And if you are in a public speaking situation, and it's relatively safe, they're not going to fire you or throw you out of whatever, you can logically know that, okay, that I'm going to be okay, and you can notice the fear. And if you make fear conscious and you let it come up into the body as bodily energy, which was this person, then that's the beginning of the liberation of fear. Because that's as I was saying earlier, that's the vipaka kamma of fear. Feels that way. And if you just let it be, let it speak to you, let it become conscious, it goes away. It goes away until it ceases. Anxiety, fear, these things. If you don't admit it into consciousness, if you just distract it, have you ever seen a man who acts very fearfully, but overplays it and by being confident? That's an embarrassment, isn't it? And you can see like the arrogance or the confidence the person has. Underneath it is a lot of fear. That person has a lot of problem because they're not conscious of the fear. They've created a personality not to look at the fear. So when fear comes up into your mind, it's actually a good thing. You haven't suppressed it into some kind of personality disorder. It's up into consciousness. So it might seem like a bad thing, but I think it's actually a good thing. It's like you're releasing this kamma. What to do with it? It's just know it as a bodily sensation. Trust and have metta for it. Say, oh, this being is suffering. Fear feels this way. All beings who feel anxiety feel this way. May I be free from anxiety. May all beings be free from anxiety. So you begin to engage it with compassion. That's what's needed. But usually it's not compassion, it's operating, it's dosa. I want to get rid of the fear. And fear. And you can see it with another person. If another person's afraid, you say, oh, it's all right. It's okay. You'll be all right. So you say that to yourself. Harder to do, but that's the logic. Then the fear starts to kind of dissipate and go away. So I would say to this person, just let it be conscious. It's okay. It's the best thing for that. When I experience the silence of the mind or the sound of silence, are the other 5 senses also in silence as well? if you, again, if I refer to Luangpor Liam's book, maybe Yom Aw is, yeah, Yom Aw, if you want to put on the internet, link to Luangpor Liam's book, No Worries, and maybe find the page where his biography is and where his statements of enlightenment are. You'll find that in any of our monasteries' publications. So you could go to Abhayagiri. So in that, I've often read it on retreats, but in that, Luangpor Liam describes his own process of enlightenment. And in that, he has these long periods of deep, deep silence where the senses are not intruding. So that's extraordinary. That's kind of extraordinary experience, and that's not common. But if you want to read a description of it, go to that. But what's more common is that the sound of silence is always available, even within the noise of the diggers and whatever's going on. And that's very approachable and very usable. And if you learn to pay attention to it, it can be a way of relaxing in the space of consciousness, and still events come and go. So, but the other is very, very extraordinary. But you'll find that reference in Luangpor Liam's inspiring, and that was in 1969. And in that he says, I think it's probably late 1990s when this was written, or he described it, and he says, and the mind has not changed since then. Not changed. Those his words. So, oh wow, he's done it. So he's realized something. So it's profoundly inspiring. But then if you read the effort he makes, it's like superhuman. To do what? To be mindful moment by moment by moment by moment, hour after hour, day after day after day. And that's difficult. That's difficult. But I found it the most interesting presentation of enlightenment because it's just in common language. It's not fancy Pali language or whatever. So if you have a chance, maybe I could look it up and put it on my machine and maybe read it here. Anyway, I love Luangpor Liam. I think we all do. Huh? When you said mind, stay with mind is the path, does it mean consciousness staying with knowing? Yeah, that's another way of looking at it. Like you could say, I know that I know. And that's, what do you mean by that? Well, if I'm sitting here, no matter what the temperature is or what's going on, I know that I know. And it's not about the experience, it's about knowing that I know. And this is so ordinary, but actually trying to stay with that. I know that I know, rather than get drawn out into thought and experience. I know that I know. Tamada, that kind of thing. So that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Do we use senses to be aware? 1. 2. If we are not aware, will there be awareness? Senses, I mean the 6 doors: eyes, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. So we don't really understand this, but you could say, what is necessary for the experience of light? Okay, what is necessary for the experience of touch? And what is necessary for the experience of taste? Well, it seems to me, consciousness or awareness or knowing. If you don't have knowing, you don't have anything. So all experience points to knowing. So I can listen to And that's why I play around with the sense doors. I say, listen to sound and feel your body. So I play around between the sense doors. But what was necessary for sound and sense, the body sense, is awareness or knowing or puru or consciousness or presence, whatever way you want to do it. So in some, like usually, like we're all out into the sense bases, but the other way, all sense experience points back to consciousness or knowing. And that's what we're trying to do, I think, on a retreat, is take a kind of different look at our experience rather than just holding our mind on an object. We're trying to kind of see that all objects are pointing to subject, knowing, awareness, and trusting in that. It's a different way of operating. So desirelessness does that. If you say desirelessness, like what did I say in the last meditation? I said non-becoming and non-resistance. It's like this. That's doing it too, because you're not engaging. Now the thing about that, it doesn't seem like much. This is so ordinary. So what? Because we're used to cappuccinos or Teslas or whatever. Because we're used to excitement and sweetness and dullness and pain and extremes of conscious experience. But consciousness itself or awareness itself, it doesn't seem like it's anything. And yet, if it weren't there, so that must be the secret. That must be the point. If I ask you to say, listen to sound and notice the changing nature of the sound, does the same thing. Because to notice the changing nature of sound, I can't be grasping sound, and I can't be engaging in sense experience. I have to be the knowing, and puru. So coming back to that again and again, yes, we can use the senses in that way, but it doesn't really matter what the senses are doing. They're pointing back to awareness, to knowing. And I guess that's what I'm doing in these meditations. I'm using the sense base of sound, right? And the sense base of body, but I'm pointing to awareness rather than the objects themselves. I didn't quite understand this question, so hopefully it was helpful. Don't fire me. Don't feed me. I observe the thought, see it disperse, then it comes back again. I observe the self with the thought, both self and thought disperse, then it comes back again. I cultivate love and kindness, then the thought comes back again. I notice there are fears, and these are clinging to the matter. How do we get wisdom to let go of those fears and clinging? Well, same old thing. Can you know fear as an object in awareness, or are you the subject who has fear? Right? Okay, I have to give a public talk, and all of a sudden, and the fear comes up, and what comes up with that is not just fears. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? I don't want to go. I don't want to. So there's not just the fear, there's me being fearful. Okay, that's attachment. Non-attachment is fear comes up, my mind wants to run with it. No. Fear feels like this. It's pressure in the body. It's sweating. It's shaking. It's horrible. But it's like that. That's non-attachment. It's the same energy. So how do we get the wisdom to let go of those fears? That very knowing in that way is letting go. Now, the word letting go can sound like, oh, I can just let go and not feel this fear. Hence, I'm not doing it right. No, I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. Letting go means letting be. And letting be means quam oton. You have to endure it. So letting go can be a very, like Ploy Wang, can be a very deceptive idea. Luangpor Cha is asked in that Buddha Comes to Sussex video. Maybe you've seen that. It's lovely to see him. He's sitting on a chair, and the announcers from BBC, and they're doing I think it's called the Everyman program, and they say, Tonajahn Chah, how would you describe Buddhism? And Luangpor smiles. Wang, Ploy Wang. What the hell? Oh yeah, okay. And then of course the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And Luangpor starts to explain. And it just sounds like you just Ploy Wang, don't make it a problem. But it's not that easy. And if you look at Luangpor Cha's life, he just didn't like ordain and say, Wang. He suffered, he made mistakes, and he he got caught by kilesa, and he suffered all kinds of things, didn't he, right? So, but then you contemplate, so what does Ploy Wang mean? Well, to me, it would simply mean, you'd have to address, well, what do we mean by attachment? And what is the result of non-attachment? So to me, it seems that non-attachment is non-identification with the khandhas as a self. And fear is a khandha. It arises, it's dependently originated. I had a certain kind of a childhood, and for some reason, the fear comes up, like the light bulb. It's natural, it's dharma, it's anicca dukkha anatta. It is not self. And that's the really difficult thing. So what does not self mean? Well, not self does not mean there isn't individuality. There is individuality. Your knees feel different than my knees, right? You may not like cappuccino. You may have different preferences. So there is individuality. The age of this body is different than. So anatta does not mean there is not individuality. So each of us is experiencing a stream of consciousness with certain karmic formations. But self-identity with that's what we inquire. And in this description of fear, you could see that fear, when I know fear as a khandha, it feels this way, an object in awareness, that's non-grasping. Now, when I think fearful thoughts, that's grasping. Oh, what am I going to say? I don't know. What am I going to do about this fear? That's grasping. It's the thinking around it. That's as simple as that. Now, the unfortunate part is that doesn't mean that you don't experience the unpleasantness of vipaka kamma. So the unpleasantness of fear is not suffering in the Buddhist sense. It's just unpleasant. And that's what you have to get straight in Buddhism, that suffering, we're not talking about the unpleasantness of life. We're talking about the ego attachment to the pleasant and unpleasant. So in context of Four Noble Truths, the cessation of suffering vis-a-vis fear, right, in that moment, is non-desire around fear. Now that does lead to the ending of fear, but first and foremost, you see that the suffering of fear is not the fear itself. It's the not wanting of the fear and the attachment to the not wanting. And then apply that to everything, all the conditioning. And you'll see like the not wanting of fear around this example is a sense of self. I don't want this fear. How do I get the wisdom to let go of these fears? How do I get rid of these fears? So it's me getting rid of it. Whereas Penyang Ni Eng is just fears like that. Not me, not mine. Anicca dukkha anatta. That's why we stress that. So do look in your own minds or your own practice. What do you mean by attachment? We use these words so commonly in Buddhism, don't we? But what do you mean? Are you clear on it? Or Ploy Wang? What do you mean by letting go? Look into your own mind. Do you think that letting go means not having any like if you have an experience of anger, do you think letting go means have no anger? in that moment. Good luck. I wish you well. Or does it mean that you know anger as a khandha, as a sankhara, anicca dukkha anatta? And that's possible. The other's not possible. If you think ploy wrong means that I'm just going to ploy wrong, no suffering. You feel very disappointed. So then that's very approachable. Having said that, as desire ceases, then the vipaka kamma ceases. And so like in the, as I said, like for sakadagami, anagami, the language around that is simply the attenuation or the cessation of greed and hatred. Right? And so if you're actually seeing how things, greed and hatred is ceasing, you're somewhere in that territory, whatever that territory might be. I mean, sometimes we make these things so grand, they seem impossible, but maybe it's not. Give yourself a break. Make it so distant. All right, we've really worked fear over, haven't we? I hope you all have a bit of fear tomorrow so you can work with this. Just a little bit. Maybe a small bear can come through here. I think I've covered. Oh, have I? Here we go. I have more success with lying down meditation, than I do with walking and sitting. I can do it for much longer, and there is more peace and clarity. I think this was the question in the interview too, right? Yeah. If my formal practice is 70 to 80% lying down, is that all right? I just feel a little guilty because it's so comfortable. I mean, I had that too, right? I mean, I'm cheating. It has to be painful. This can't be it, but it is it. It's a wonderful posture. So again, I cannot do a yoga nidra retreat because, if we're all lying around here, I mean, the Kuba Ajahns are going to be on my case. So you have to do it. But if you're successful with this posture, I would recommend really developing, because you can do long meditations and really explore attachment to body. So hats off to you. But I know how you feel. And I didn't tell the monks for years. I felt I was cheating. Don't tell the monks. But it does work. It does work. Okay, I think that's done it. Okay, we'll finish there.